I think so many online entrepreneurs that are out there building brands, we just try to skip steps. And we're like, all these big people, they all use AI for everything. And they've got robots cooking their food for them and like doing all this, like, and they do these spray and pray emails, and they have a VA that does all their social media, and they answer their email, and they don't have to actually talk to anybody. And they're not doing very much business either. And their business isn't growing. And I'm like, most of us are at a stage that's we're building, we're just getting started. We've got our 1,000 true fans, or maybe we're getting to that point. Let's do some of the non-efficient things that make sense, like talking to people one-on-one, or sending voice DMs on social media to welcome people to. That's unscalable. What are the unscalable brand things that take a little bit more time, because everyone else is out there trying to be ultra efficient and use tech and hack and all this. And we can stand out if we're not doing those things. We're doing the hard to scale, the unscalable.
This is episode 118 of Multi-Passionate Like a Boss, and I'm your host, Jenny O'Connor. I'm a writer, entrepreneur, and certified shiny object lover, and I am obsessed with finding the easy way to live the dream. Hey, Boss fam, welcome back to the show. Today, we are talking with the man, the myth, the voice made for movie phone, Adam Schaueble. Hello, my friend. How are you?
Jenny, oh, that is awesome. Not only do you say my name perfectly, my last name, but that was a great little roll into it there. I love it.
Yeah, so I'm not sure if you know this. I don't know if we've talked about it or not, but I'm writing a novel based on my podcast. And all of the first season guests are characters in the novel. So that means you are in it. And your section is all about your voice.
Oh my God. I can't wait to read it. This is now you got me fired up.
Oh, it's going to be so much fun. And it's just true. Everyone that I send to your show ends up texting me later. And that's the first, it's, you have so much value to offer. You're such a smart person. But the first thing everyone says is like, oh my God, that voice. I think that's you found awesome. Your calling. I'm glad that you're a podcaster. I think you could also like maybe do audiobooks. There is a guy on TikTok who says really innocuous, totally innocent things, but in the voice. So they end up sounding super like porny.
Yeah. When I first started, like, how can I make some money on this podcast thing? I got paid for voice gigs. I recorded a lot of like podcast intro and outro stuff and commercials. The two weirdest jobs, they're both offered to me. I only accepted one. One person paid me a pretty large sum of money to say the word juicy like in 50 different ways. Which was hard. Once you get past the first few variations of juicy, it's like 50 shades of juicy is a lot of juicy.
That is.
So, but we got the job done there. And then I spoke at a conference, and someone approached me on the sidelines and asked if I wanted to be the voice of a video game that they were developing, like a video game character. I was like, this sounds interesting.
Yeah.
But then they were like, can you do an Asian accent? Because this is going to be a samurai character. I was like, dude, I'm a giant white guy from Indiana. I'm like, this will be the worst. I'm like, there's no way I'm doing that. That'll be terrible. So I did not accept that gig. But yeah, that I did a lot of that at the very beginning of my audio career.
Okay, so there has been a little foray into the different things you could do with that magical voice. I love it. Yeah. Well, keep an eye out for the book, because it's going to be a funny scene with you. So I'm looking.
I can't wait.
Yeah. So let's get into this. This is a listener requested episode, and I personally have a lot to say on the subject of how podcasting can be a great free way to demonstrate your expertise and get eyeballs on your work. And I thought, who better than Adam to have a chat with about how to be a good podcast guest and how to get the podcast host to say yes to you in the first place, because you are a veteran podcaster. You have hosted not one, but 3 different podcasts at one time. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah. All right. So you know your stuff, and I think that this is going to be a really, really juicy one for the listeners. So let's start with how to decide what shows to target. And you have a strategy for this, Adam. So I'd love it if you would explain that.
Yeah. So, I always look at it through a lens of being a podcaster and growing my show by being a guest on someone else's show. But this will work for anybody that just wants to be a guest on podcasts. But I keep an eye on the charts on Apple and now on Spotify. They both have like top 100, top 200 rankings charts. And what I like to do is look at like the Apple top 200 and the niche category that you kind of want to be swimming in, and start at the lower edge. So don't start at the number one, top 10 podcasts, because those have serious gatekeepers. They're getting a lot of requests and it's really, really hard to get on those. Start with 190, 195, getting that bottom 10 of the top 200 and start looking and going, okay, I'm going to listen to some of these shows. I'm going to see which ones I might be a great guest for as far as, my content, things like that. And then I would reach out to those ones. But the way I would cut through all of the, the noise of all the marketing emails and the PR firms that are emailing people saying, I've got the best guest for you, is I would always invite them to collaborate on my show first, or I'd come on my brand first. So it's kind of a give first mentality that got me through a lot of the gatekeepers. And then I was able to build relationships. So like with that technique, I would go through like a section of 10 at a time with the top 200 list on Apple. So week one, it'd be number 190 through 200. Then I'd go 180 to 189, 170 to 179, and just move up each week and kind of sort and sift. And using this technique, I started to have a lot of great guests on my show. So if you don't have a podcast, do you have an Instagram? Do you have a live stream? Do you have a YouTube channel? Do you have a blog? Do you have a newsletter? Could you potentially invite anybody to collaborate first on, kind of add value first, make friends, and then potentially get that invite? So that's kind of the high level overview.
Yeah. And I love that you're so about adding value. Like, what is in it for you as the podcast host if I come on your show? It's such a good thing to lead with. And I also think that you really have some due diligence to do at this point of the process. Like, if you want to go on a show, have you listened to an episode? Like, you should, at the very least, so you don't inadvertently call the host Amanda.
Yes.
When you reach out to them. You had that happen. Let's talk about it.
Yes. So I've got quite the Reels, Instagram Reels backlog of me just talking about people pitching me in really weird ways or just terrible podcast guesting pitches. Because honestly, I'll probably get 6 to a dozen per day of people just pitching me they want to be a guest on my show. So I've got an Apple top ranked podcast. So, but this one in particular, the first email, dear Amanda, I have the best guest for you, blah, 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 blah. And it wasn't even about anything about business. So it was a terrible pitch overall, but they called me Amanda. So they didn't do their due diligence. They didn't know my real name. They didn't, know who
they didn't know
my
your
show was about.
I mean,
No,
it's not.
I mean, no, I'm
They
like, you
didn't
listen
try
to
at
1 second
all.
of my show, I'm not Amanda, like
Right.
that's so I was like, man, this is interesting. So I did an Instagram reel because I thought it was so funny and I read it. And then I go, I'm not going to respond. Let's just see if they respond, if they email me again. So next day, here they go. Amanda, why have you not replied yet? We've got such a great opportunity they're continue to pitch me as Amanda. They sent me 4 emails calling me Amanda. They never bothered to check. I mean, it just blew my mind. I kept on doing reel after reel after reel. And I think eventually at the end, I was like, my name's not Amanda. Bad start. I'm not gonna have you on my show or something like that. And I didn't get a response back. But there are so many weird things that happen. I have people all the time that you can tell that they are a PR agency and they just have a template. Mm-hmm. And it's like, dear podcaster, insert podcast name here or whatever. I have people just email me the template. They don't even fill it in. It says insert podcast name here. I love your show. Insert podcast name here. And I'm like, what are you thinking? This is terrible.
Also, why go to the effort of doing it like that? That is not that is never going to, so yeah, absolutely. I want you to come on my show. That's never going to work. So I don't understand. So, okay. Knowing the host's actual name, that's thing one. Like nothing is going to put the nail in the coffin faster than getting that wrong. And then ideally you would listen to an episode or two and or review past topics to see if your knowledge and your content pillars have a place on their show and won't be a repeat of something that they've done recently, right? So that's what doesn't work for you, calling you Amanda. Do you have any examples of guest pitches that have really impressed you that stand out?
Yeah, so I think when you are pitching somebody, and let's say that you aren't asking them to collaborate first, like if you, for whatever reason, that's just not the direction that you want to go, then you have to think about what's in it for the host. So some things that could be in it for the host. One could be you're a famous person that they want to be connected to. So, for example, I've interviewed Michael Hyatt and Gretchen Rubin on my show, and they are two of my favorite authors. And I don't care what they talked about. I don't care. I don't care at all. I just got to talk to them. I'm like, that's awesome. Come on my show, please. This is great. I was excited to have an hour with them because I read all their books and I buy all their stuff. So that's one reason they would want you to be on their show. Another reason is that you teach something that their audience absolutely needs to hear. And it's symbiotic to what they are teaching, or they don't see you as a threat. Like if they're a service provider, if they sell books and online courses and they talk, if you talk about the exact same thing, you're probably not going to get on. Like if you pitch me and you're like, I want to teach people how to make money with podcasting. And I'm like, that's exactly what I do, bro. I've got 400 episodes on it. Like, let's talk about something else. So it's got to be unique. It's got to be symbiotic. So you have to kind of do your research and be like, what do they sell? What angle can I take here? What have they talked about in the past? What can I uniquely present that they haven't talked about that would be very interesting and beneficial to their audience? And you got to lead with that. And then, so unique content, that's another option to go with. And the third thing is the financial opportunity. So I've had people that were like, I've got a really great affiliate program. I've got this product. And I've had people that go, hey, when I come on podcasts and we talk about X, Y, and Z, and you allow me to present a link with my product, X%, I have a whatever closing rate, and I'm going to give you 80% of that. If it's like, so they will present me and be like, hey, I've got a program, product, or service. I'm selling that right now for however many dollars, for however many sales that come from your show. I'm gonna have a unique link for you. Then you get a high percentage of that. Like, don't come at me with, you get 5%. Like it's like, I'm talking 50% or above, 50 to 80%. That's attractive. That's going to be like, oh, okay, cool. Like I'm running the numbers now. I'm getting however many thousand downloads per episode. If I have this conversion rate that they're saying that they get, then there's a financial opportunity, but they still have to fit my content pillars and my standards of like, I'm not just going to bring, for podcasting business school, I'm not going to bring somebody to come on and talk about being a dentist or something like that. Like it's got to be in line. And I have, by the way, been pitched by somebody that want to talk about dentistry on podcasting business school. That was another one of the poor pitches, but I would like to say that 9 out of 10 dentists do agree that you should listen to my show.
Nicely done. I like how you brought that full circle. I have noticed like some pitches definitely stand out to me as well. One woman wrote me a 5-star review and included the screenshot of it. Don't just say I reviewed you, because prove it.
Yeah.
But she included the screenshot in her inquiry to me. And I was like, front of the line. Like I almost don't care what you have to say. I do care what you have to say, but that will get you in the door.
Yep.
And now I'm listening. And another guest of mine, Chris Bryant from episode 107, she sent me an email with the subject line collaboration request. So that speaks to your point of like, this is a mutually beneficial relationship. Yep. I'm suggesting. And she included her press kit, which we'll talk about in a minute. But what stood out to me, and this is kind of funny, she made a Loom video. So for those of you who aren't familiar, Loom is just this application that lets you make, for the free version, up to a 5-minute video that you can share with someone else. It's great if you have a virtual assistant for like explaining how to do a task. And all it was, she just opened up my podcast page in Apple Podcasts so I could see my little logo and all of my episodes. And her face was in the bottom in a circle, and she was just chit-chatting with me, kind of like scrolling up and down that page. Like she wasn't doing anything in the video, but because it was a video, it stood out to me. Because she was on the podcast page, I knew she'd at least looked it up. She'd probably at least read the description of my show, and it was just good. It was, I told her when I brought her on, I said, one day I'm going to make an episode about how impressive that pitch was, and I'll give you a shout out. And so I'm actually going to drop the link to that video in the show notes in case any of you want to take a look at it, because it took her 3 minutes to shoot, and it really, really stood out. So, a very sort of simple thing you can do that will absolutely move you up in line. Like if you're getting 6 pitches a day, that's going to be a more interesting pitch, I think, to open up.
Oh yeah. Now, let me tell you how you can totally screw up that advice that Jenny just gave you. If you have your assistant do the video, or if you have a PR agency do the video, no thanks. Like, It really bothers me when somebody wants to come on my show so bad, but they have someone else reach out. They can't send the email themselves. They can't make the video themselves. I'm from Indiana. We call that big timing. People, oh, he's big timing me or whatever. Like, no thanks. Like, if these words that you are writing are true, then you need to write them. You need to do the video. Otherwise it comes off as inauthentic. But yeah, standing out with, you took the time, you say my name, say my correct name, and you like leave me a little video. It's the same principle that I have when I message new followers on Instagram. Like I reach out and I'll do a voice direct message and let them know that, hey, this is really me. This is what day it is. And I'm saying your name, I'm saying my name, I'm saying what day it is. And I'm saying, welcome to my Instagram channel. So same principle there. You can hit a home run if it's you and if it's authentic and you're really doing that. If we try to AI chat GPT VA it a little bit too much, it's going to be very noticeable that it's inauthentic.
Yeah, that's how you messaged me for the first time on Instagram, and I've been in your orbit ever since. And I mean, I talk about you on the show. Anyone who has followed me for a while has heard your name numerous times. So this works, you guys, and it does. It feels so much more personable. Why do you think? I believe there is a little bit of an idea in people's minds that having those gatekeepers, that having a press firm reach out on their behalf looks fancy. You would prefer a real person anytime, right?
Yeah. To me, maybe it's just me. I don't get professionalism. I get stuck up. I get too busy to talk to me. I'm just a number, like I'm not important enough to
spray and pray. Spray and pray is exactly what comes to mind. 800 other people got this exact same message in their inbox today. Yeah. That's interesting. I'm glad that you're of the same mind about that, because especially if I'm reaching out to someone and I want to make them like aware that I have listened to their show and that I think that these are the reasons why I would be a good guest, that has to be you. That can't be your assistant doing that for you.
Yeah. I have I wouldn't call it love-hate. I would call it more of a hate-hate relationship with PR firms. And I like messing with them. So if you have your PR agency message me about you being on my show, I'll come back at them and go, oh, this sounds cool. My fee is $10,000 per show. And I just kind of put this astronaut. I would never charge anybody that much to be on my show, but I know that they will stop emailing me if I say it's $10,000 every time somebody comes on my show.
There you go.
That's what happens.
That's funny. I hadn't thought about it. I really like, if the pitch is terrible, I like not responding, because then I figure they'll waste a lot more of their time and keep trying. And it's a very mean-spirited thing to do, but I'm also like, you didn't do your research. If you don't use the word multi-passionate in your pitch to me, I'm not helping you out. You're doing it so wrong. So we're the same there, it sounds like. All right, so let's talk about press kits or one sheets, which are obviously like a 1-page simplified version of a press kit. Do you have any tips for what to include in that as the guest being pitched?
I really, when I look those over, what I'm looking for are their core topics, and something's got to grab my attention. And I really don't want the person that's like, I know all things about marketing. I'm like, who do you really speak to specifically? Because like if you mention the word podcaster in there, if you're a social media expert, but you really specialize in helping podcasters, if you can create a conversation around really helping podcasters, or you are a podcaster, you're speaking from experience, like you got to speak to my people. My people are podcasters. And
Mhm.
so if you have a show, if you're trying to get on a show that is, marketing to stay-at-home moms, you better have that core subject in that one sheet that's like, okay, I specialize in teaching stay-at-home moms X, Y, and Z. Like entrepreneurship tips for stay-at-home moms. I've done a TED talk with 7 entrepreneurship tips for stay-at-home moms, or something like that. Like I want to see my target demographic being mentioned in there. Like this happens to me a lot. I'm looking through, I'm like, oh, these people have a lot of experience. They've done TED talks. They've made a lot of money or whatever, but they don't mention my people anywhere in this pitch. They don't mention podcasters. They don't have a podcast. They don't mention talking to podcasters. And I'm like, that's a really important thing. When I have somebody on, like I want them to be speaking to my audience. So, I mean, I probably would suggest, and it's not efficient, but I would alter your one sheet a little bit depending on who you're saying it to.
I could not agree more. And as multi-passionates, like I know you guys listening are going to relate to this. You've done it on your resume before. I know you have, because you have so many like incongruent jobs that you've done that don't necessarily all go on a resume, for bartending as an example. So you take those other ones off, and you kind of move things around. I would do the same thing on a one sheet. I think that that's good advice.
Yeah, it's inefficient. It's not AI. It's not like I think so many online entrepreneurs that are out there building brands, we just try to skip steps. And we're like, all these big people, they all use AI for everything. And they've got robots cooking their food for them, and like doing all this, like, and they do these spray and pray emails, and they have a VA that does all their social media, and they answer their email. And they don't have to actually talk to anybody. And they're not doing very much business either. And their business isn't growing. And I'm like, most of us are at a stage that's we're building, we're just getting started. We've got our 1,000 true fans, or maybe we're getting to that point. Let's do some of the non-efficient things that make sense, like talking to people one-on-one, or sending voice DMs on social media to welcome people to. That's unscalable. What are the unscalable brand things that take a little bit more time, because everyone else is out there trying to be ultra efficient and use tech and hack and all this, and we can stand out if we're not doing those things. We're doing the hard to scale, the unscalable things, like one-on-one connections. Like I invite people that listen to my show onto my show for podcast audits, one-on-one for half an hour, and it's free. And people are like, I can't spend a half an hour with somebody and not get paid for it. I'm like, why not?
Mm.
Like, you know, those episodes, I've done hundreds of them on my show, and I make more money off of those things than anything that I do, because of the expert positioning that is being built. So, if you want to stand out, do the unscalable, the personalized video. You're changing your one sheet. You're really curating your pitch, and maybe be like, yeah, I've left you a rating review. I actually have listened to your latest 10 episodes or
Mm-hmm.
whatever. And you have to prove to me that you didn't just fill in the blanks and send us to 400 other people. So whatever you can do to do that, that's what you need to do.
Yeah, listening to the episodes this is not the shortcut path that we're giving you here, but if you want to stand out, it is absolutely key. Also, if you listen to the episode, make sure that the sentence you write that proves that you listened to the episode does not sound like a bullshit generic sentence. Like, I really appreciate the tips you shared about business with your audience. That is so unspecific. Don't do that. Because again, you're just wasting your effort, right?
Yeah.
Something real that shows you actually did listen, or don't bother, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So yeah. So I'm going to link to my own one sheet in the show notes if you guys listening want to like copy the format or just see how I lay that out, I think it might get your creative juices flowing. Another thing that I would suggest is knowing your content pillars so well that you could talk about them in your sleep, forwards and backwards. You're not going to trip up over them. And so if you're just getting started, sitting down and really taking some time to figure out like what those like mission critical content pillars are, so that you, because we get nervous when we get interviewed. I mean, you probably don't anymore, Adam, but I will admit that I still do, even after having done this, where this is 118 episodes here and plus me being interviewed on shows. It's easy to get nervous and flustered and kind of forget what you were talking about. So your content pillars need to be on lock. So at least that part of the interview is on point. You won't skip a beat, even if something distracting happens or your cat starts playing with a toy or whatever could be going on. Your Roomba starts to eat something.
Yeah.
Invariably that happens. Yeah.
I used to have a Roomba that was, I swear, was possessed by the devil because it would only turn on. My wife was like, I set it for 3 p.m. when you go and pick up the kids. That's the only time it'll run. So I'm like, I'm going to flip on my microphone at 11 a.m. and record me a podcast. I hit record and I hear da 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 da, and it comes over and it just attacks me. Like it could hear. I think she set it to the setting where it can sense when I'm podcasting, and then it would come right over me and just bang into my chair over and over and over again. So
and then get stuck and then start beeping. Yep. Yeah. So mine does that too. How weird that they're all possessed, apparently.
Yeah. I'm not gonna lie. I actually ran over it with my truck. I got so mad with it. I threw it outside and I backed over with my truck and I killed it. So no more.
Okay. It's funny because when I first got it, I was like, this is the best day of my life. And I was so thrilled about it for a while. And then like one of my favorite authors wrote a post and she was like, that garbage robot thing. Like she called it a bunch of curse words. And I laughed because I was like, what do you mean? It's amazing. Now I am constantly frustrated. I'm like, oh, it got stuck again. Or I'll be like staring at it. Why are you so dumb? You're not smart. Why are you so dumb? Your home is over there. Why are you going that way? Like I'm always yelling at it. Isn't that funny? I think it's called the hedonic treadmill. That stuff that makes us happy over time eventually stops making us happy. Yeah. Relatable. Definitely. So I wanted to mention, I had a guest come on one time who did a really niche kind of coaching that I'd never heard of before. And when I asked her to define it, she could not. I mean, the interview sort of came to a screeching halt at that point. Never published that one. So by all means, know your stuff. Like that should go without saying, I think. But if there's anything that you might need to define, have the definition again. Just you can spew it without even having to think about it. Do you have any horror stories about unprepared guests, Adam?
Oh my God. Do I ever? Okay. So early on in my health podcasting days, if you guys are in your first year of podcasting, one of the fears is that you are going to run out of things to say and people to talk to. Like we all have that. Like, oh my God, I've got my first 10 episodes kind of mapped out. And then what do I say?
Yeah.
And who do I talk to? Where am I going to find guests? So when these PR companies start messaging us, hey, I've got the greatest and latest and greatest person that needs to come on your show. I'm like, oh my God, thank you. Like, this is great. And I had a lot of people come on from PR agencies that were pitched to me. I would just said yes to everybody because I didn't know any better. One guy was a health influencer and I am there kind of waiting, the Jeopardy song's playing in the background. And I get this email. It's like, I'll be there in a few, bro. Okay, cool. So I'm just waiting. 30 minutes later, this guy pops on and his reason for being late, he's like, man, I was sitting down and getting ready for our interview. I wanted a little snack first. So I poured my dressing on this beautiful salad. And then I realized it's time to start the interview. And I was like, I can't let this salad go to waste. By the time this interview's done, it'll be all mushy. I just poured my dressing on this salad. Stop it. So he sat and ate the whole salad while I waited. 30 minutes later, he pops on. And then, to layer it on, I start with the question. So his name was Mike. Mike, tell us a little bit about yourself. He went for 37 minutes straight without me saying anything.
Oh my God.
Olive oil salad, man, 30 minutes late. And the next 37 minutes was just him talking. And that interview did not get aired. But that's one good one. And then another good one, this person was like the speaking coach to the stars, and the PR agencies, like all these famous athletes and all this stuff. And so I'm interviewing this guy, and he's got like lawn care happening in the background. There's weed whackers going off, and like somebody's mowing real loud. There's somebody blowing some leaves. His phone, he's got a house phone, and that's ringing in the background.
Oh,
His
God.
dog comes up and jumps on him at one point, and that was weird enough. But throughout the interview, he's a professional speaking coach. I would ask him a question, and he would stop me mid question, be like, "Stop, Adam, stop. Say it like this." And he would have me
Ew.
re-say what I just said, because he was coaching me as I was interviewing him, and it was just got super duper weird. I did interview that one just because it was super weird. I was like, this is kind of funny. So yeah, those are two that really stand out, and they were both pitched to me by PR agencies. And the thing is, these guys both paid these PR agencies like tens of thousands of dollars to get them booked on podcasts, and they looked like freaking idiots the whole time, because they weren't prepared for it.
Wow. The unsolicited advice is rich. Oh my God. And I have also had guests. I recently did not air an episode because he talked about himself like so arrogant. And that's the thing, is like, you're here to promote yourself. I understand that. But like it did not strike me as self-promotional. It struck me as arrogant. And it was like 37 minutes of that. And I was
Yeah.
just like, this is unusable. I'm sorry. Like,
Yeah. Or
oh.
somebody, a lot of times people like they just released a book or something, and every question you ask them, and like, well, and in my book, I talk about blah, 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 blah.
Mhm.
And oh, and in chapter 3 of my book, blah, blah, blah. And it's just like, all right, we know you got a book. Just shut
Right.
up about it and let's have a conversation.
Yeah. Yeah. So like being a real human is going to come into play here as well. Before we get to that part, the day of, how to show up for the interview, let's talk about podcast matchmaking services. You use some of these, right, Adam? What are your faves?
I mean, Podmatch is a good uh, community. Alex Sanfilippo has, he runs that. He's in the podcasting space. Um, that's probably the best run matchmaking service, I would say, where you can go on there, you can fill out a profile, you can kind of set like, are you looking to be a guest? Are you wanting to be, have guests on your show? Both, and you can kind of filter people out. It seems like a podcaster dating service kind of
Yeah,
thing. Where,
it's like Tinder for podcasters.
yeah, yeah. So like, I feel like that one is well run. That's a great place to start. I think they've got a free and then a paid version. And you know, if you are looking for guests and you get on a service like that, just be ready, because here comes the floodgates of all these people that want to be on your show. So, if you're just like, oh, I just want to get one or two guests, I probably wouldn't sign up for full on matchmaking service. If you just hang out with other podcasters, you're probably going to be able to find guests fairly effectively.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So on Podmatch, since you have a profile, you don't have to like send your pitches, you don't have to send a one sheet because people can view your
Yep.
profile. But if you're pitching someone else, they have criteria for what makes a good guest for their show. Read that. In mine, I say you have to be multi-passionate. That's why I'm flabbergasted that 85% of the pitches mention nothing about being multi-passionate. It's great that you coach coaches how to be better at business. Like, how is that relevant to my specific
Yeah.
audience? So don't skim over that part. Also, again, with the here's what I bring to the table part of your pitch, don't just write a pitch and say, go check out my profile. That's lazy, and that puts the work on the podcast host. I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to archive your pitch.
Yeah.
So here's what I bring to the table. If you want to know more, feel free to check out my profile. Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Give them that appetizer. Give them a little bit of food.
absolutely.
Get that
Yeah.
appetite going.
Yeah. 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 But I mean, leading with what you stand to gain as the podcast host is going to be your best bet every single time. Yeah.
Yeah. 100%
Okay.
agree on that.
All right. So on recording day, don't no show. Oh my God, I'll kill you. It
Yeah.
is the rudest thing to no call, no show. I know life happens, but also if you're not going to show up, if you wake up and you have laryngitis or whatever, you need to let the host know immediately, because don't make them get ready. Don't make them get camera ready and get the whole thing set up, because sometimes that takes a lot of effort. But I've spent money. I've had like virtual assistants research a guest and, paid $45 for that research only to have the person no call and no show. Oh
Yeah.
my God, don't do it.
Yeah. Yeah. Be on time, have your headphones and your mic like good to go. You don't want to
Eat
be that
your
person.
salad
Eat
before.
your salad before. Yes. Yes. And just like be familiar with the platform you're recording on too. Like maybe ask that, are we on Zoom? Are we on StreamYard? Are we on Riverside? Like, and make sure you're familiar with that. And if you're not, because maybe your mic needs to be set up a different way, or like you don't want to be that person like, can you hear me? I can't hear you. Can you see me? I can't see you. And like back and forth we go. And then, 17 minutes later, we get it figured out. And then like you don't want to be that person on the other end being a guest on someone else's platform.
To be fair, when I interviewed you the first time, I couldn't figure out how to turn my microphone on. But I was new and you were willingly being a guinea pig for me. So that's
Yeah.
I get a pass.
Yeah. Total pass. Total pass. Now you're, 100 plus in, you're good to
Now
go.
it's old hat. Yeah.
Yep.
Another thing I want to say is like is don't ramble. And again, here I think that is a sign of nerves, and I completely understand. But when someone asks you a question, answer the question, then shut up so they can ask you the next question. If you lose the thread, it happens. It happens to me as the host sometimes. Just say, remind me of the question again, just because I think a lot of people think if they just keep talking it'll come back to them, and then 37 minutes have gone by and he's just been talking about himself the whole damn time.
Yep.
So just say, remind me of what I lost my train of thought, remind me what we were talking about, bring it back, but make sure that you take pauses every now and then and let the person who's interviewing you have a beat to ask you the next question.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree with that. Like all you listening in, like Jenny and I are having conversation. It's not me giving a TED talk,
Yeah.
very different. And, people ask me all the time, like, what's the percentage of talking look like? And I don't know, like, I think the host should be in that 30 to 50% of they're talking. And then the guest should be in that 50 to 70% talking zone, like something like that's probably what we aim for. It shouldn't be the host 10% and the guest 90%. I think that's a little bit too heavy on the guests end. Like I always enjoy when I come on. Like I like getting Jenny's insight in this conversation. Like we're both adding things to the conversation here. And that's a sign, just to give Jenny some props here. She's a really seasoned interviewer, because some interviewers go question and then go to the next question. And it's just like check, 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 check. And we're like, if she has something to add to the conversation, she adds it, and as a good host should. And so, really be aware, be cognizant of when you're in that guest chair, those percentages, and be like, am I dominating a little bit too much here? Am I pausing? Am I giving them an opportunity to say something? Is this too one-sided? Because, you want to be a referred guest. You want them to go, oh, and now you need to go on my other friend's show. And then you don't have to do the work, because podcasters know podcasters. And if you kill it, if you crush it, you have a great interview. They loved having you on. You add so much value. When their friend is listening to their show, like, hey, can you introduce me to Adam? Because he was on your show and I want to have him on my show. Boom. Then we don't have to do all this work to get on the show initially.
Yeah. And you get reviews on services like Podmatch. So it
Yep.
behooves you to be quiet and let them get through all the questions that they've prepared to ask you. And yeah, absolutely. I think that back and forth is really important. And it's the same way you'd listen to a friend who was talking. It's like this really is not reinventing the wheel. You just have to be mindful of that. And I will like continue to go back to, I know that when you're nervous, sometimes you forget how to be a normal human.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think it's just really important to have that, to treat it like a real conversation and not just like an hour long self-promotional TED Talk. So just be mindful of that going in. What I really love that you do, Adam, whenever you come on to somebody's show is you give the listeners a challenge at the end of the episode. Can you talk about that?
Yeah. So I do this when I speak on stage. I do this when I come on other people's shows and other people's platforms. But one of my goals is to get them to remember me and get them out of, like, as podcast listeners, we tend to be very passive and like kind of, it's almost like we're in entertainment mode, but I want to go into implementation mode so that we can actually get some sort of a result out of it. And, implementing isn't listening to every single episode. It's listening to an episode, taking action based off of what you learned on that episode. So when I speak on other people's stages, when I speak on other people's podcasts, at the end, I do my little implementation alarm challenge. So what I usually do is I go, hey, if you learned anything or were inspired by anything in this last 45 minutes or whatever, here's what I want you to do. You're probably listening on your phone. Go to the alarm, set it for 24 hours from right now. So set it for 1:40 p.m. Central tomorrow. And your goal is, if we lined up a bunch of action step dominoes today, thought wise, I want you to knock over one domino by the time that alarm goes off. Like, I want you to do something. I want you to initiate towards one of your ideas that you got today. So, like, for example, with our conversation here, maybe you don't have a one sheet and you're like, I like what they said about the one sheet thing. Then maybe your one domino that you knock over by this time tomorrow is you start working on your one sheet. You're not gonna have it perfect. You're not gonna have it all dialed in, but maybe you just go and grab a template somewhere online or YouTube for one sheet. And that's your first domino. You just created some momentum. And then we can go in there. You can start working on it. Maybe by next week, you've got a full on one sheet and you're ready to send that out the next time that you pitch. But yeah, I love to end with that. And it gets people to think of me because as they work on it, like, this is the thing that Adam told me to do. And as a sneaky bonus, if they totally forget about it, their alarm goes off 24 hours later and they're thinking, why in the hell is my alarm going off at 1:40 in the afternoon? And they go, Adam, and I get them to think about me at least one more time.
Oh, that's so good. That's how, when you are trying to remember names, it's you repeat it back like 3 times in that first handshake, that kind of thing, that retention, the alarm the next day. It's genius. I absolutely love that. And I don't know if it was you or someone else in the coaching cohort that said, if you have a lead magnet that has like a unique link that you normally send people to. So I've got my lifestyle design for multi-passionates ebook, which is at jennyo'connor.com/good life. But then when you go on someone's show, you make a unique link for it. So instead of good life, it would say Adam, or it would say podcasting business school or PBS, or some way that to make it easy for people to remember. Then you can actually track the links or the downloads you got from that particular episode. And I think that is absolutely genius as well. Was that from you? Did I get that from you?
I used to do a variation of that. Like, that's definitely some knowledge that was gained within our group. We talked about that before.
Yeah.
But when I used to go on really, really big shows, like in the health space, if I was going on like a top 20 podcast, I would create a unique landing page that said, welcome to blah, blah, blah podcast listeners. And I would have like their logo right there, and in addition to the unique URL. So I would kind of combo that up, and I would just doctor up a landing page and kind of, on Kajabi, I just duplicate it and it just kind of goes. So I would do that, maybe put the picture of their host so that, like, they go there and they say like, oh, I'm in the right place because that's where I found them. And with, services like Kajabi, I think Squarespace, you can do this too. You just hit the duplicate button and all of a sudden you just recreated that whole landing page and you can kind of fill in the blanks with their information and away we go.
That's great. ConvertKit, you can do that as well. When you're making a unique link, let's say you don't feel like doing the landing pages or you don't have a system for doing that. What do you use to make a pretty link that's easy to remember?
Well, the way I do it, again, I use the Kajabi platform. So when I create a new email, or I can create the link there where I'm like / whatever, based off of just the Kajabi platform. And so I can kind of do it within there. Otherwise, I've used GoDaddy before and things like that. Just like, you could create a unique URL completely with GoDaddy. And that's a different way. So instead of podcastingbusiness.school/Jenny, I would do that if I was going to create a landing page, but maybe you have something that's like, there's something very memorable. Like, okay, so I had a lead magnet with my health brand. Like one of the big, is all about like not cheating on your diet. So I created the vanity URL defeatthecheat.com because it was easy to remember. It rhymed. And because that's like the whole thing when on someone else's platform, just give them something freaking easy to remember so that they can, and defeat the cheat. It kind of rolls off the tongue. It rhymes. And I had lots, and I would aim that at different things. So I could aim that to a lead magnet. I could aim that to a Facebook group. I could aim that to my podcast or whatever. And just thinking, what is a vanity URL completely that I could build out and just, that's really, really simple and easy to remember. It rhymes, it sticks out, it's funny. So my merch store is yourmomsubscribes.com. Another funny, it's easy to remember. Like I can just tell that to people on stage, like, yeah, go to yourmomsubscribes.com and tell her thanks or whatever. Like that's, and that'll get them to remember that. So memorable, not necessarily like that extension, the / whatever, but just having something memorable period that you create on like a GoDaddy. I think that's a pretty good idea too.
Okay, that's great. If you have a WordPress website, there's a plugin called Pretty Links that will help you do that. And I think even like Bitly, the link shortener, you can customize the back end. So all of those, and I'll drop all of those resources in the show notes for you guys to check out, but find a way to create unique links so that you can do that kind of custom track. I love the idea of a landing page because that just feels special. Like, especially for like it's a big host, it's a big show. You're going to get a lot of traction from that. I think that is a really great idea. And then the last thing I would want to say, if you're going to be a guest on a show, is promote the show when your episode comes out. Like, splash it everywhere, put it in your newsletter, put it on your social media. And also link back to the host's website, because that creates something called link juice, and it helps with your domain authority. Like if their site is higher than and they link to you and vice versa, that helps. And it never hurts you to link to a site with a lower domain authority, but it does help you if theirs is higher and they're linking to you and vice versa. So please, I mean, what's the point of being on a show if you're not going to promote it like crazy once it comes out, right?
Yeah.
Anything else that you would add to just be like a stellar guest?
One thing that I like to do, or again, be mindful of, is compliment the host during the interview. That's just saying things like, that's a great question. Or, wow, I've never been asked that question before. Great question. I mean, be authentic. If you've been asked that question a million times, don't say that, but like pay them some compliments. And then at the end of interviews, another thing I like to do, I'm like, hey, if you all enjoyed this episode, go into Apple Podcast, leave a glowing 5-star rating and review, and make sure that you mention my name and that this is your favorite episode of the show, just to feed my ego. And so it's kind of like funny or whatever, but it's like, it's paying it forward to you and to the host. And it's a, getting ratings and reviews are something that we hate asking for, but we know that we need out there. So when a guest comes on and asks for it for us, they do the reminder for us. That's always really nice.
Yeah, that's such a good piece of advice. And you paid me a compliment, and I wanted to thank you for that. I really do appreciate that. And this was such a juicy episode. And I know like the specific people I'm thinking of who have been asking for it are going to be absolutely stoked. This is all of the best tips I could possibly imagine condensed into one little episode. Before we go, tell my listeners how they can find you and listen to your podcast.
Yeah. If you want to come hang out with me, just head on over to my main hub, my website, podcastingbusiness.school. Go enjoy Podcasting Business School episodes wherever you listen to audio. I've got over 419 and counting. And I've got a new limited series podcast. If you're an online consultant, service provider, or a coach, I've got a limited series podcast called Podcast Monetization Tips. And that's a 21 episode podcast series. It's kind of like an audio book. Again, you can find that for free anywhere you listen to podcasts.
Love it. Awesome. This was so great, Adam. Thank you so much for spending time with me today. I really appreciate it.
Genio, you're one of my favorite pod pals. Appreciate you, my friend.
Thank you so much. I'll talk to you soon, my friend. Boss fam, if you enjoyed this episode, would you please share it with other multi-passionates who need to hear these messages? I would appreciate you and love you forever for doing so. And until next time, remember, strive not to be a success, but rather to be of value. Now get on out there and do the thing.